All right. Good evening, everyone, to the second meeting of the evening, the Financial Affairs Committee meeting on Tuesday, March 3rd. We'll begin with a roll call, starting with Ms. Lohman.
Jennifer Levin, present.
Robin Murphy, present.
Charles Burdell Williams, present.
Leah Mulhern, present.
Caroline Watts, present.
Ross Whiting, present.
Mia Blitzstein, present.
Zachary Epps, present.
And Dan Schultz, present. The next item on our agenda would be approval of previous meetings minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Sloan first, Mr. Burdell Williams second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Mr. Swaggart, if you could in the primary agenda, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. All right, tonight, like every other finance meeting, we'll take a look at our interim financial statements through the end of February and take a look at our local revenue collection and how that's performing. Tonight, we'll also look at two of the other funds that the district manages. One is directly related to the facility meeting, and that is our capital funds, our capital reserve, and our capital projects funds that have become extremely relevant in light of the new construction projects that are ongoing. And we'll also take a look at our food service operations. Again, seeing the spotlight a little bit with some changes, potential changes in our operations. And last, we'll take a look at the budget updates that occurred last month at the state and federal level. There was some news and what that might hold for the school district going into next year. So looking at the interim balance sheet that we put together through the end of February, you can see that our total cash holdings are $74.3 million. Last year at this time, our total cash holdings were $81.9 million, a decrease of $7.5 million. As we've been talking about construction and money that was in the cap reserve, a lot of the money that was in the cap reserve was sitting in our general fund because our general fund was holding on to cash and investing it. As we began spending our cap reserve fund on the Cedar Brook, Glenside, and Stadium project, we began to draw down from those funds, hence the decrease in cash. That's reflected on the liability side and interfund payables. They dropped $9 million directly as a result of that change as well. And then looking at our change in fund balance, our revenue through February of 2026 was $122 million versus $116 million this time last year. And our total expenditures were $87 million versus $84 million this time last year. So flipping over to the next page and looking at what those revenue changes are and those expenditure changes are. As we've seen throughout the course of the year, our local source revenue year over year is $3.2 million more. And on the state side, now that the state has passed its budget and released a lot of funds to the school district that were owed, it is finally caught up, and our state budget is, our state payments are $3 million more than the prior year. We did receive a large payment from the Ready to Learn block grant. If you recall, some of that money is for next year. Approximately $1.1 million is for next year. So we'll have to, at the end of the year, we will move that out of our current revenue and set it aside for next year. And on the federal side, we have collected $748,000 less than the prior year. Last year, we still had some final residual ESSER money that came in August and September of 2024. That was a spending deadline. So that additional amount is reflected in last year's federal revenue. Going down the expenditure side, our regular programs, which is primarily teacher salary benefits and regular instructional activities, has been consistently about $500,000 more than the prior year. That's due to the wage increases of our teaching staff and our support staff working in our school buildings. On the special ed side, we are showing a decrease year over year. I believe we are a payment behind in our installment payments due to the IU. And there was a little bit of disruption in payments to charter schools as a result of the passage of the budget and the revision in formula and what that meant for funding all around. So by the end of the year, this will no doubt catch up and be more than the prior year. As discussed in prior facility finance meetings, Our administrative services are $350,000 more than the prior year. That's partially due to some curriculum purchases and also due to when staff was hired. This accounts for principal salaries. And when we started the year last year, we had a lot of principal vacancies that were filled midway through the year. This year, we had no principal vacancies at the beginning of the year. So we incurred more wages year over year. And looking at facilities, we saw that final spending on the roof grant was $1.497 million or something along those lines. That was all charged to this account because the $900,000 we received is sitting up here in state revenue. So $900,000 more in state revenue, $1.5 million more in facilities expenditures. Any questions on the balance sheet or the revenue and expenditure listing?
Any more questions, Ms. Lovin?
I just have a mental block about this. Where are charter school payments accounted for in here? Or are they two different places?
They're two different places. So they're accounted for in our regular ed and our special ed, depending on what the classification of the student at the charter school.
Any questions online? And we'll go back for questions later as well. Pause. Check. Thank you.
Looking at our graphical representation of our structural surplus, you can see it still holds strong throughout this course of the year. There's always two inflection points. February, March is the next inflection point, and that's because that's when we pay our debt service. It's paid in September and February, and that's roughly $10 million. So two large payments occurring throughout the year. The rest of it is very stagnant. And looking at our local tax collections, real estate taxes are reflective of the tax increase going into this year. Our delinquent taxes, you can see the tax increase was 3%. We didn't quite collect 3%, but our total cash flow from real estate taxes is up because we're seeing more delinquencies collected this year, which reflects the timing of when we receive those real estate taxes. Our earned income taxes are showing a 5% growth over the prior year. Our transfer taxes are still showing a 16% growth over the prior year. So all of this is still showing strong financial indicators from our local source revenue, and our earnings on investments are still strong. The Federal Reserve has held interest rates, the prime rate, relatively stable, and there hasn't been much movement. We do anticipate two more rate movements throughout the rest of the year, in addition to our principal reduction as we spend some of that money down. So we would expect this to slowly decrease. Any questions on our local revenues? More questions? All right, the next topic tonight is capital financing. So we have our general fund, which we call Fund 10 at the state level. We have our capital reserve fund, which we call Fund 32. And we have what we call our capital projects funds, which are Fund 39. If you look at our audited financial statements, the capital reserve and the capital projects funds will appear as an aggregate fund because it's all related to capital spending with minor differences between the two. So typically any large expenditure that we incur will go through our capital reserve or our capital project fund. The board's policy is items individually greater than $5,000, but a lot of items that are $5,000 are more supplies or just simple repairs of existing equipment, and that will be reflected in our general fund, not expended through the capital reserve fund. So these are more for larger type projects that carry weight on the road. The capital reserve and capital project fund do not require a formal budget per the state, but as you can see, we prepare budgets for all of our projects and we present them at the facilities meeting so we know what to expect and how much to spend so we don't overspend the fund. So the primary difference between Fund 32, which is capital reserve, and Fund 39 is when we issue a bond, we are required to put it in a separate fund and track the spending of that bond separately. So that goes in Fund 39, whereas Fund 32 is primarily funded by the general fund, by payments to the general fund over the years. Any questions on that before we flip to the next slide? So I thought it'd be useful to put the last 4 years of spending out of these two funds to show where we started with back in 2023. We had $16.7 million in our cap reserve. To date, we have approximately $15 million in our cap reserve. So over time, whenever we had a surplus in our general fund, for instance, in 2023, we had $6 million. We transferred that surplus in our cap reserve to help deal with large capital expenditures so that it wouldn't interfere with existing operations. It wouldn't require payment out of existing funds. So going back to 2023, you can see that's when we started the fire alarm project. It was roughly $2 million that was paid out of capital reserve. We had a playground that needed to be resurfaced. That was paid out of capital reserve. Across the top here, we have local source revenue. This is all interest income earned on the fund that's coming in as local source revenue. And then when we ended 2023, we transferred $6 million into the fund, ended with $22 million. So some of the larger projects incurred over the year were the high school fire alarm, were the closeout of the Cedar Brook Middle School construction project. And then in last year, the year ending June 30th, 2025, you start to see payments for the high school stadium. As that project ramps up, you see the design payments for Glenside, the design payments for Cedar Brook, as that starts to ramp up. And if you recall last year, we purchased furniture for Elkins Park. That was for 5th and 6th grade. And that came out of this fund as well. And of course, over the years, we continue to transfer excess monies into the fund to fund these purchases. So going into this fiscal year, year ended June 30th, 2026, we're continuing to draw out of this fund to fund the high school stadium. So all of these projects have in essence not been funded by debt. They've been funded by excess operations. And going forward, that's when things start to change. And that's when this goes from just Fund 32 to now Fund 32 and Fund 39 as we move into the next phase of this project, which is the debt issuance to pay for Cedar Brook and Glenside. So last month, the series of 2026 was issued, and we already have an estimated repayment schedule on that bond issuance, which is expected to settle within the next 2 weeks. It brought in roughly $15.8 million, and you can see the bonds yearly payments are listed here in blue. In yellow is the projected next bond issuance to cover the balance of the project. If you recall back to the facilities meeting, it's roughly a $25 million joint project, and this money together roughly equals $85 million. So it's a phased in debt service. So we're going to phase in at $698,000 next year. That will increase to 1.3 million and then 1.8 million, where it will flatten out through the life of the bond issuance. Just for reference, the budget that was presented to the school board had debt service for this bond listed at 720,000. So it came in just below that number. And my favorite thing to talk about that bores everyone to tears is our future debt service. So if you look down here in 2041, 2042, that is when all of the existing debt for all of the elementary schools, the Cedar Brook Middle School, all the projects that have been in the past, that debt service expires. And that's when a tremendous amount of money is freed up. So the district can potentially take on a large project like the high school. Any questions on the bond funds and the cap reserve fund?
Mr. Bordeaux?
Back to the prior slide. Just a question about the local revenue source relative to the previous slide, I think, where we discussed very similar, right? Basically financing, right? We're making money off of. So is that exclusively off of what's inside of the fund balance cap reserve?
That's
versus
we allocate the two based on the fund balance. So the general fund obviously is a much larger fund.
right?
it starts the school year, balloons, it has over $100 million in it at one point, and then shrinks down to, not next to nothing, but it shrinks down to its lowest level in the summer. So it's collecting a lot of interest up front in September, October, November, whereas this is more of a stagnant fund that's very consistent.
Got it.
So yeah, the way this reads is interest income, construction expenditures, and transfers in the general fund.
Thanks for helping to translate what I
I
was.
realized I was walking through it. I started in the middle and then jumped back to the top. Way more confusing than what.
That's okay. That was just one clarifying question. Thank you.
Any other board questions?
All right, so just for clarity, when we receive this money, we'll set up, this bond will get its own separate checking account. All the checks cut out of this bond per how the bond was written and per how the bond was approved have to be for Cedar Brook and Glenside.
Sure.
Dr. White?
Not a question, but a comment, because I'm just going to make the implicit explicit for our new folks who are joining us. The debt changes that we see here are a result of the district's reorganization of our grade structure from 2 intermediate schools in 5, 6, and 7, 8 to a K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12 structure, in which we eventually intend to close a building as a result of that restructuring, which was Elkins Park School. And so what's happening now is the 5th grade has moved into the elementary schools. The 6th grade is in the mods, while the Cedar Brook construction, which is reflected here, and the Glenside construction, which is reflected here, is undergone over the next year or so it will take to get that complete. And so just for the purpose of everyone who's online and why we are adding this debt service now, that is the purpose. So we can restructure our grade system and eventually close a building.
And to underscore, that was a very long process that led to
Years.
this path. And this path also was by far the most affordable path. The alternatives would have been anywhere from 2 to 3 times more expensive in order to meet the actual facilities needs of our district. So, thank you, Dr. White.
Yes, and I didn't mention, as discussed.
We don't need to, yeah.
Like,
Worth underscoring.
by closing Elkins Park and by closing the mods, we will shrink the district's footprint by 180,000 square feet of building space that we want to keep cool, clean staff. So it is a cost saving measure.
I do think there's a question
Yes.
in the participant.
Thank you, Ms. Blitzstein. It's Daria. And if you could, I know you introduced yourself in a previous meeting. Since this is a new meeting, for the record, if you could just state that you live in Wainscott and your name.
Daria Katchmar, Cheltenham resident, 4 years, living in Wingcote, and Jeff Cherico is my commissioner. Just a really quick question, because as I told you, I'm trying to learn and understand. Why is there not more integration with the school board and the commissioners? When I look at my tax bills, I get a tax bill that is outrageous for the school district. And when I hear that you're spending $13 million on a stadium, that causes me pause. And yet when I look at and attend the budgetary meetings for the commissioners, and I hear that they're going to cut our libraries by $100,000, it seems that there is some level of disparity. And so I'm trying to understand why there is not a representative of the school board reporting to the Board of Commissioners and a representative of the Board of Commissioners attending these meetings, because as a Cheltenham Township resident, all I'm saying is outrageous taxes. And again, my real estate taxes are 1/3 of what my school taxes are. So perhaps someone needs to take me offline and educate me. Again, I'm completely ignorant on these things. Just want to understand.
Sure. So I'll just, since I'm chairing this committee, I will give an initial answer. And of course, our board president, I think would be a great person, Ms. Mulhern, to speak with you. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Financial Affairs Committee and have served in this role for about 8 years. I would also be very happy to meet with you one-on-one and talk through district finances and the processes. At the highest level, I will just make one thing that I think is important to note. We're two separate organizations, two separate governing bodies, two separate missions. We have separate elected boards, and we do work together. We work together through a group called the Liaison Committee, and also pay attention just interpersonally into what's happening in each organization. And also, each organization has staff, which does the actual work day to day, and they are in close contact. So I just want to underscore that there is a lot of collaboration between the two. And when it comes to this particular slide and these sets of projects, during that multi-year period where we were investigating what paths forward, there was discussion with the township to see what types of opportunities for collaboration there would be. But at the end of the day, our mission is to educate children, and the township is to operate a township. So the footprint of overlap isn't necessarily as fruitful as one might think for the big ticket items, right? Building a school, housing 5th grade, the township frankly can't offer too much to help us with that. But you're right, there are opportunities for collaboration when it comes to things like libraries, and there are discussions for things like that. So that's an initial answer. If any, Ms. Mulhern, if you wanted to add more, but otherwise we should probably stick with the agenda. But I would be very happy to have a deeper conversation.
I don't intend to derail your meeting. So please, excuse me.
No, you're totally fine. Thank you. Please email us and we'll find a time to talk.
Yes. All right. Thank you again. We can go to the next slide.
All right, moving on to food service operations of the school district. Again, the food service fund is now required by the state to formally adopt a budget. Internally, we have a preliminary budget that we operate on. Food service operations tend to be very consistent from year to year. We can demonstrate that when we look at the financials on the next slide. But the school district runs its food service operations through a third party, through a food service management company, which currently is Whitson's Culinary. We participate in the National School Lunch Program, which means we provide free and reduced lunches for students who meet the requirements. We must meet nutritional standards with the meals we serve, and we must follow regulations of the federal government, including bidding and reporting regulations, amongst others. Looking back at the last 3 years of operations, I'll start at the top and work my way down to make it a little more easier. Our operating revenues are charges for services. These are actually lunches paid directly by students. The next line down are purchased services. This is everything from food to labor to supplies. It's virtually everything else that the food service department does. The supplies account consists of donated supplies by the federal government, which are donated food items that we record separately. So they give us roughly $200,000 of meat, fruit, vegetables, pasta, things of that nature. Depreciation is depreciation on capital assets that the fund owns. And moving down to our non-operating revenues, this is our investment income on money held within the fund. State sources are state reimbursements for meals served to free and reduced students, and federal sources are federal reimbursements for meals served to free and reduced students. So this fund, without federal funding, runs an operating loss of, in 2023, $1.78 million, $1.9 million the last 2 years, and it's entirely dependent on funding from the state and federal government. We had 3 good years of positive results in the food service fund. 2 of those years was largely a result of supply chain monies received from the federal government to offset future costs of goods. But we're starting to see all of that catch up with us. This year certainly isn't looking as favorable as the prior 2 years. By the time we're done recording all of our expenditures. And what are we doing with the money that's sitting in the food service fund, which has grown to $1 million? We're reinvesting in food service equipment. A lot of the equipment that was purchased with the newer elementary schools is reaching the end of its useful life. Those pieces of equipment have 7 to 10 to 15-year useful lives, and we're already starting to replace them. For instance, this year we've already spent over $100,000 on additional equipment, replacing ovens, steamers, significant freezer repairs. Last year we spent roughly $76,000. So we're continuing to invest that money back into our food service program to keep it running. Before I move on, any questions on the operations of the food service fund?
So,
Again, this is something I have a mental block about. Are you providing breakfast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that free to all?
So breakfasts are free to all per the state. So that money obviously doesn't appear in our operating revenues because it's not physical funds collected. That's down here in our state source and federal source reimbursement.
Okay.
any other board questions? None? You have an online questions?
All right, so and I also thought I would share one of the ways we monitor our food service operations. We look at meal counts served at each building for breakfast and lunch. We compare that to enrollment, and our primary driver is our participation percentage. So our goal with the food service fund is to serve nutritional and tasty meals that our students want to buy that are beneficial to them and their ability to be able to learn within the school district. So obviously our goal is to try and increase our participation percent as much as possible and to engage our students in the food service program and healthy meal options. So on the top here, I listed lunch count per building for the past 3 years, along with the number of days we were actually in operation serving lunches. To date, we've served lunches through the end of February, 109 days. And on the bottom here, I listed the breakfast count per day. Looking over here on this side, you can see our participation percentage is relatively stagnant year over year, but this is where we look for opportunities to grow. So for instance, looking year to date, well, my computer's frozen. Year to date, the questions we ask ourselves are, why does Glenside have a lower participation? And we focus on efforts to increase participation in that building, along with Wyncote. When we get to the breakfast side, we put more effort this year into trying to encourage Glenside Elementary students to participate in the breakfast program, and we doubled our participation. Now we're currently focused on Cedarbrook. It's a little trickier with older students who may not have a schedule where they arrive at the beginning of the day or may be able to get up and make their own breakfast and not want to eat whatever we're serving. But we're always looking for ways to make our presentation more presentable, our food more appealing, and to engage students. Before I move on from this slide, any questions?
Any more questions? I have a quick question around the participation percentages. Do we know if there is a difference in participation percentage between students who are on free and reduced lunch versus students who are not on free and reduced lunch?
I think you can kind of see the correlation. So we'll call them our Title I schools that have a larger percentage of students on free and reduced are Cheltenham Elementary and Myers Elementary, and they have the higher participation percentage. Cedar Brook is borderline, and this last year Cheltenham High School was, but the high school always seems to be a different type of animal because obviously students have more dependence on their food choices.
It might be helpful to understand what the disaggregated percentages are. And I'm not an economist, nor I can only guess that there might be a relationship if we're trying to measure quality and appeal. Folks who are going to reduce lunch may have more motivation to engage in our lunch program because it is free, even if there's room for improvement. So I want to make sure that as we're tracking that metric, trying to make sure we're looking at the data that is going to reflect what we're trying to measure. Does that make sense? Is there, I see a hand in our panelists.
It's me.
Great.
It's me, Epstein.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering if you could refresh my memory as to the timeline. I know that we're opening up a possibility for a new contract for a new food provider, and I just wanted to know what is the timeline on that.
So that request for proposal was advertised last Friday. There is a pre-bid walkthrough with potential vendors on March 19th. There is a response to their questions that can be asked from the time they get the RFP through March 23rd. And then the bid opening is scheduled for April 7th.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're one slide ahead of me.
Thank you.
I don't think that there's anything on here that I didn't cover. So any questions on the food service fund or operations? All right, so always reflected in the finance committee meeting is the Act One timeline and the budget process. We are somewhere in here between February and April. Because of the way that the school board's meetings fall, where we need 30 days of advertisement of our proposed final budget before we adopt a final budget, the April meeting is going to have to be the meeting where we discuss the proposed final budget. So next month, we'll discuss that proposed final budget. We will probably look at a scenario for the proposed final budget. And again, the keyword there, proposed, and we will wait till June to adopt that proposed final budget and make any necessary revisions from that proposed final budget to the final budget upon adoption. But in February, there was some significant activity on the state side and on the federal government side. On the state side, Governor Shapiro presented his proposed budget for the state. And on the federal side, they actually adopted the federal budget going into next school year. So the governor proposed a 4.8% increase in education spending. The past several years, we've been averaging roughly a 4% increase. So this is well in line with what has happened in prior years. There really wasn't a lot to this proposal in terms of funding of education that was very dramatic or different from what we've seen in the prior years. There's a continued focus on increasing the basic and special ed subsidy in a nominal way. A lot of the money, again, is flowing through the Ready to Learn block grant, where we received in the prior year. And again, because of their size, a lot of money goes into pension reimbursement for school districts and Social Security reimbursement. And there's similar proposals to what last year's budget ended up in trying to reduce cyber charter school tuition for school districts. So I thought it'd be helpful just to list what our state budget line items are and talk about each item. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, there's nominal increases to the basic ed subsidy, which is 7 million out of 31. The special education subsidy, there is significant money put into the Ready to Learn block grant, roughly $1.1 million more already seen dedicated towards this Ready to Learn block grant, which is where the majority of the school district's additional funds from the state are going to come from. And then the Social Security and the retirement is a 50% reimbursement on our spend. So the money that goes into that is just reflective of wages spent within the school district. The one piece that's a little different from prior years is the state was approving some of the gambling money that had been collected over the years for homestead and property tax relief. And there is currently nothing on the horizon to increase that amount of $5 million. I didn't include a slide on it, but I believe there are some anticipated revenues on the slot parlor games you see at local establishments and on adult use marijuana that they're hoping will fill some of the rest of the budget throughout the state, which will, I'm not sure if that's 100% tied into this homestead money. But those are the potential new monies the state is looking at to have in this budget. All right, so we talked about all of this already when looking at the last slide. And one piece of the governor's presentation that I thought was somewhat interesting is the continued look at the demographic mix of Pennsylvania. So when you start to look at the population that makes up everything as they define the K-12 universe, you can see our number of children aged 0 to 4 is dropping by 6%, and 5 to 9, 2.5%. So we're starting to see drops in birth rates, which is something we talked about when we looked at enrollment, how it impacts the school district as a whole. And then we're starting to see a shift in our labor force. We're moving to increases in the number of individuals who are 70 and above, and decreases in working age individuals, which impacts the taxes that the state can collect and therefore fund education. Any questions on the budget? Okay. On the federal side, our total federal budget is only $934,000 of what comes directly out of the U.S. Department of Education. So that's much smaller than the $30 million we're getting from the state. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Long story short, it's essentially level funded year over year. This graph just lists in dark blue what the current funding is. The light blue is what the final funding is, which looks exactly like what it was before, and the red was what the current executive branch administration proposed, with a cut to Title II and Title III, but obviously those fortunately did not materialize. Any questions on the federal budget? And that was the last slide.
Thank you very much. Any final questions from the board or public?
Just a curiosity question, Mr. Swager, since I'm learning all of this. So excuse me if this is a stupid question. You said the federal budget allocation was level funded. I'm just curious, is that balance between what the state contributes and what the federal government contributes to Cheltenham, has that been consistent?
It's been relatively consistent. It's always,
Or
so these are through the title programs. We get another $1 million through IDEA, but the state calls that local source money. And then, as we talked about in the food service fund, we're getting another $2 to $3 million in subsidies for our meal programs. So all in all, it's millions of dollars, but not near what the state contributes, or not near what local school districts have to raise on their.
and that division has been roughly consistent.
That's correct.
So that's not a change by administration.
For at least 10 to 20 years, I would guess. I mean, it's
Well, depending on how far you want to get back, in 2008, the American Recovery Act funding came through school districts, and then COVID, the ESSER money came through, which was millions of dollars more per year. But other than those two waves, it's been very consistent.
Thank you.
not a stupid question. All right. Seeing no other questions or hands, any motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Super,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.